Good evening. Welcome to the Korea Society's live webcast. I'm Jo, Arts and Culture Director of the Korea Society. And we're coming to you live once again from my kitchen. And tonight, we are thrilled to welcome sommelier Kyungmoon Kim to the Korea Society, a graduate of Culinary Institute of America and the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Kyungmoon Kim actually began his career as a sommelier in Seoul, Korea, while he was doing his mandatory military service in the Navy, no less, when he started to enter sommelier competition and win. In 2009, Kyungmoon Kim helped his friend from CIA, the chef Jeong-sik Im, to open his first restaurant, Jeong-sik, named after the chef in Seoul. There, he spearheaded the much-lauded wine and beverage department and eventually traveled back to New York to open the second Jeong-sik in Tribeca. After 4 years of running the beverage program and the operation at Jeong-sik, where he helped it garner 2 Michelin stars, Kyungmoon Kim departed to join the wine team at the Modern in 2015. During sommelier Kim's tenure at the Modern, the restaurant earned 2 Michelin stars and the Grand Award from Wine Spectator. It was also during this period sommelier Kim won the Master Sommelier certification and joined the Court of Master Sommeliers in 2016. In 2019, sommelier Kim started his own company, KMS Imports, sourcing genuine and authentic distilled spirits from Korea. Welcome to the Korea Society, sommelier Kim.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Great, thank you. Thanks for joining us. A quick reminder to our viewers, you can send questions for sommelier Kim via Twitter at Korea Society Art or email artsandculture@koreasociety.org. So once again, thanks again for joining us tonight, sommelier Kim.
Thank you.
I thought we would start by talking about wine a little bit, since that is your first passion. Do you remember the first time you drank wine? Do you remember what was it?
Well, I think it was 1978 Chateau Lafite that my father dabbed on my lip on my birth. Just kidding. I mean, we never really drink a lot of wine. Probably, I mean, the first wine that I remember was it was in Korea, of course, and there was a box of Franzia box wine. They're sitting on top of the kitchen counter, and I just take a sip when my father was not looking. So that's my first experience with wine. But that's the start.
So your father liked wine, it sounds like, definitely.
He loved food. He loved dining out. But I mean, we were never sophisticated. I mean, it was in early 1990s. So, I mean, there are not a lot of wines out there. So, but my father liked to drink and enjoy food. So
Great.
I was very much exposed to that.
It certainly sounds like it was an auspicious start. So I believe you went to the Culinary Institute of America to train as a chef. But what made you become interested in wine, and why did you decide to choose wine as your profession instead of food?
So, so I went to CIA. The first time that I was really got into wine was at CIA while studying. Let me see if I can share the screen.
And I believe you went to high school in the US, and then you went to the Culinary Institute of America, right?
I think my first experience of the kitchen is when I was in high school. I was working in a cafeteria as a dishwasher.
I see. Yeah.
And I always had an interest in food. And my mother is actually a professor in a food science. So she recommended me to go to CIA. And at that time, I had no idea about CIA. I only knew what CIA was, not the cooking school for sure. But when I found out, I was really excited. And I spent 2 years studying about cooking. And they teach also not just about cooking, but everything about running a restaurant operation. So we got to experience the front of the house service and wine aspect. And when I finally learned about wine, I was blown away by the the marriage of food and wine and service all together. It's not just about the great food in front of you. It's all about how it's presented and story behind it. And the service aspect was also very, very important. And I fell in love with that.
So then, what do you think makes wine different from alcoholic beverage? Obviously, you talk about the story behind it and also the service that's involved, but what's very particular about wine that that attracted you to choose wine compared to other beverages?
I think the wine is very unique. In a bottle of wine, there is a history, art, and science. And when you pop a bottle and pour into someone's glass, there is an endless story that sparks a conversation. And I think it's the beverage that binds people together, even with strangers, and you can start a whole new subject on it. And everyone has different opinions on wine, even though you're enjoying the same bottle. Everyone tastes differently. Everyone has different opinion. And I mean, we get to respect each other's opinion, and respect the diversity too. So, and I think there is a saying, in vino veritas. I mean, there is a truth in wine, but I think there is no one absolute answer to wine, though. So that's a beautiful thing about wine.
That's a really wonderful way of putting it. But then I was also wondering, for example, if I would go out and have dinner with you or have drink with you, I'll be always scared to have not quite the correct knowledge or information about the wine. Do you think there's like right way to talk about wine or the wrong way to talk about wine?
Not at all. I mean, you just have to speak out about your opinions, and you just freely talk about it, and it starts a whole another dialogue about tasting and your background and your experience, and you starting to improve yourself in a vocabulary and how to describe wine, and that's how you learn. And I would highly recommend to engage with sommelier in a restaurant. That's what they're there for. They would love to entertain you. They want to talk to you about wine, and that way you can easily learn while dining out too.
Is there like a right question to ask a sommelier, or what's the best question you ever heard from a client?
Well, the best question, I say, when someone say, "I don't have a budget, pick me a best wine." But I mean, there are many great questions, and my favorite question is, the guests are always open for recommendation, and they want to just experience the whole dining dynamics in the restaurant. So they ask about the chef's philosophy, how it will go with the food and wine together, and that starts another fun dialogue. So, yeah.
Is there any wrong question that one can ask?
I mean, there is never wrong or stupid questions, but one of my biggest pet peeve is in a restaurant, we have to ask every guest that at the end, after we take the order, if guests have any dietary restriction. And my biggest pet peeve is when someone say, "Oh, I'm allergic to bad food." So that comes out at least 5 times a night.
Really?
So, but that is always my pet peeve.
Yeah,
I mean, you're in the restaurant, you're here to enjoy good food. Of course, we're gonna serve good food,
Yeah, totally understandable. But I also wanted to ask you, because on your resume, you had a very successful restaurant, Cheongshik, open in Seoul, and then you guys decided to come to New York to open the restaurant. What was and it was a very different concept, Cheongshik. It's different from your usual idea of what Korean restaurant is. So what was the biggest challenge when you guys came to New York?
So from opening Cheongshik to opening in Seoul to New York, there is a whole new dynamics, different clients, and different restaurant scene. But we wanted to convey the same message, delivering the excitement of Korean cuisine on a whole another level. And when we first opened at opened 정식 in Seoul, and I mean the new Korean restaurant was I mean one of the first, and there was never anything like that before. So it was so different that people was going crazy about it, and it took off immediately. And he made a very unique Korean food. They're, I mean, different in visual, but from a menu description, all the Korean knew what they're getting. And so when they actually tasted the food, it was very comforting, and there was something so familiar. So people were really into the flavor of the food. But on the flip side, when we came to New York, the flavor is not something they're comfortable with or familiar with.
I see.
So it was a whole another a challenge for us to just get them to try it. So it took a longer time in the beginning because people expect Korean food to be a Korean barbecue or bibimbap, more typical Korean food. But once they set their foot in, once they try our food, they became our regular and they became our big fans. So it took a little longer, but we got to the same goal that people really love the actual taste and the flavor of the food.
And was there a huge difference between the clients in Korea versus New York when it comes to wine and how to pair wine with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as far as the drinking culture is quite different in Korea. They like to go 2차, 3차. They like to drink after meal rather than having actually enjoying the food and beverages together.
I see.
So a lot of fine dining restaurant people don't really enjoy wine that much. Probably has shifted by now, but at that time people were still felt strange about ordering wine or talking to sommelier, a little intimidated. And also the Korea has a definitely higher tax on wine that also gave another hurdle to selling wine. But as far as New York, I mean, I had definitely a lot more fun in New York than Korea when I arrived, and I felt like a child in a candy shop. I mean, you can find any wine in a lot better price point, and there's so much more options. So I had a hard time adjusting to focus on the quantity of the wine that I can have. But it was definitely a whole new, different experience.
Yeah, so that sounds like a fun time. And then you moved on to new challenge, working at the Modern, but also then you moved on to the biggest challenge, I guess, to become a master sommelier. And for those people who are not quite familiar with this system, can you tell us a little bit about what becoming a master sommelier really means? If that's
so, well, I mean, a lot of people think about sommelier as someone who just drink wine and talk about wine. But as far as a sommelier profession, we are part of the service team. We are offering a great service that is linked with food and wine together, but we're still part of the service team providing the warm hospitality. And that is the first and foremost. But to become a master sommelier, you have to pass a certain test. There are actually 4 levels to the test.
Right. There's introductory, certified, advanced, and master, correct? There are different process that you have to go through in order to, so it seems like it's not like a very short process to become one. How many years did it take you to go through that process?
So from beginning to finish, I started in 2006 on a first introductory course, and I finished my master sommelier exam in 2016.
So it took you
so
10
it
years.
Took me back 10 years of time. But in between, I have to serve military for 2 years. So that put me a little pause, but I was able to study a little bit more in a theory portion rather than actually tasting and doing a service. But still, I was able to keep studying for it.
Wow. And how many people usually try out for their tests? Do you know?
Well, I mean, for introductory course, there are about 50 people and one course. And this is open to not only professionals, but also wine aficionados or someone who's interested in different beverage. So I do highly recommend to look into introductory course. It is the 2-day course that we offer the knowledge about the wines around the world. And we introduce our own deductive tasting, which is a blind tasting experience for anyone who's interested in wine. So this is a 2-day course, which is pretty short, but it is a very long day and it's packed with a lot of information. And at the end, there is a small just quiz, which is not too difficult. And that is really a great way to start out your journey about wine.
I see.
And then there is a certified exam. This is a 1-day exam only. This is the exam that certifies that someone has a basic skill and knowledge to become a sommelier. So there is a theory exam, and there is a little blind tasting of 2 wines. And then there's a quick service demonstration. And if you pass, you get a certified sommelier certification. And then there is an advanced course and advanced exam, which is we recommend to have at least 5 years of full-on restaurant experience.
Right.
And then once you pass advanced exam, and you go to a master sommelier exam, which is a lot more rigorous, very intense, 3 full-day exam. They require you to know just pretty much anything about beverage, not only wine. And also being able to blind taste 6 wine, 3 white wine, and 3 red wine in a 25 minutes. You have to be able to describe from the sight, nose, and a palate, and give the final conclusion in front of many masters, which goes in verbal. So you have to have a nerve of steel, and you have to be prepared. You have to be athletic, and you have to give everything on the table within that 25 minutes, which is very intense. And then you have another service portion, much more extensive, different type of service, from recommending champagne or aperitif, or recommending cocktails, and wine recommendation, and just about everything about the restaurant situation, which involves recommending food and wine matching.
Oh, so you are supposed to, basically, you don't know what you're going to be serving, and then you are supposed to answer the question right there, which wine you think will pair well with this dish and that type of thing?
Right, you should have a very extensive experience, not just in one single region or a single style of food. So anything is fair game. Sometimes they give you a menu, it's a whole Indian menu, or sometimes it's all Japanese menu, or sometimes all Italian menu, and you should be able to recommend a type of wine from certain region or certain grapes, and you have to be very versatile.
Do you remember what your service test was? I'm just curious what they gave you.
It was a more global cuisine at the time, but so it can be just about anything. But I think the wine list was all from one single region. So you should have a knowledge about why this food goes well with this certain region, or something that is comparable to. Such a thing as that. So I mean, going back to your point, I mean, for master sommelier exam, it requires a lot of people who's proctoring the exam. So we can now accommodate more than 50 people. So each master sommelier exam, there are 50 people. But for advanced exam, certified exam, introductory exam, for a span of 10 years, I'm sure there are thousands who have applied.
Right. And it's like there are less than 250 master sommeliers right now
I
around
mean,
the world?
there are many numbers going around. I think
Right.
we're up to date with close to 270.
270. Got
Yeah.
it. So still very selective group. But so then what makes one a master sommelier? Is it the palate? Is it the nose? Is it memorization? I mean, obviously it's combination of all these different skills, but what do you think matters the most in terms of to become not just a master sommelier, but a really good sommelier who can, taste all these things and smell things, and then being able to distinguish between not just whether it's a good wine or a bad wine, but to be able to see where it came from. What makes somebody do that? Is it? I'm sure it involves many different skills and training.
Right, and I must say, to become a master sommelier, you have to have a great passion and great love for wine and hospitality. I mean, sommeliers, as I mentioned, someone who works in the restaurant, who is able to carry out the wine service in the top level. So first, you have to love what you do, and I mean so
yeah,
you have to have a certain palate and certain nose and certain skills, but I think that's more secondary. I don't think I was ever born with a palate or nose, but studying in the Culinary Institute, being able to actually cook with different ingredients, fresh herbs and spices and different vegetables and fruits, and exposed to a lot of different flavors. And that really helped me to expand my vocabulary in tasting wine and be able to make an actual link with what you taste in the wine and what you actually smell. So I think that's very important. And a lot of people think one should have absolute palate, but when you're actually tasting wine, the nose is more important than a palate, because a palate you only taste 5 senses, but nose you can taste as many as 1,000. So
got it. But it certainly sounds like so. But you think that it is possible to train yourself to discern different tastes and discern different smells and fragrances?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's more of a learned trait, because I mean, even though you have a best palate, if you never tasted a gooseberry before, you cannot really describe it, even though it's there.
That's true.
So you have to just be open-minded. You have to try everything. So when I was studying wine, I go to a farmer's market, grocery store all the time, and then start smelling different things, spices and fruits and herbs. And people look at me very weird, but that's how you learn to memorize different aromatics and flavors.
Okay, so maybe there's hope for me too.
Yes, anyone can do it.
Great. So you reached this sort of the pinnacle of your profession, becoming a master sommelier, and you worked at one of the best restaurants in the New York City, or arguably around the world. But then you decide to turn to Korean traditional liquor. What made you were you always interested in Korean liquor? I mean, you grew up in Korea, so you probably had some idea of what they were, what was available and what was out there. But was there any moment when you realized that you really wanted to know more about Korean traditional liquors?
Probably only Korean liquor that I was exposed to was Somek. There are not a lot of premium spirits out there. But when we first opened our door at Jeongshik in 2011 in New York, I mean, I prepared with a great wine list, with a comprehensive and a very extensive list that can meet the needs of many different customers around the world. But majority of guests had the same desire. I mean, they wanted to experience the Korean food with Korean beverage, which in the beginning really struck me, because I was so deep into wine and I wanted to become a sommelier, and it was all about wine. But you had to provide what guests want. So I started to search and look for what I can offer in New York, but the choice was very limited. And I contacted a few producers in Korea, and they didn't show much of interest because we are just one restaurant in New York, thousands of miles away. So it was really hard for them to just send it out their product. But I quickly realized it was almost impossible for them because they are very limited in terms of their resource. They are very small family operations. So they couldn't, even though they wanted to. So even after 10 years now, you don't see a lot of high-end premium Korean beverages, even though you see a lot more great Korean restaurants outside K-Town now. So I decided to take on the mission to seek out the artisans in Korea and bring it to the States.
So let's talk a little bit in detail about Korean traditional liquors. As you mentioned, a lot of people have this idea of what soju is, which is that green bottle of very, well-priced liquor that comes at a lot of the Korean barbecue restaurants. And some people are maybe a little bit familiar with the makgeolli, which is sort of the milky white drinks. But if you can let us know a little bit more about, so what makes Korean traditional liquor different? Especially because sometimes, soju is referred to as the Korean vodka or Korean sake, Korean version of sake. So what makes it different, even from, say, Japanese traditional liquors or Chinese liquors?
Right. So just to talk about the brief introduction of how sur is first made. So very traditionally, sur was made by steaming a grain, mostly rice. And the medium that converts rice into an alcohol is nuruk. Nuruk is a starter that has different types of mold that contains an enzyme and the yeast that breaks down the starch in rice into a sugar, and the yeast convert into an alcohol. And then after fermentation is finished, you have a vessel that it's filled with a different type of sediment. And then once you filter it, you still have a very milky white brew that is called makgeolli. And once you settle it, the fine sediment falls on the bottom, and there's a clear liquid, and that is called cheongju. In old days, cheongju were reserved for nobles and the royals, and those sediments were discarded, and more commoners took those sediment and put water in it, and to drink it like a makgeolli, more in a beer-like sense. When you work in a field all day, if you get thirsty, that's what you drink. With the addition of water, the makgeolli goes around 5% alcohol per volume. So it is fairly low. You can just enjoy it in larger quantity. But cheongju is more refined and more of a premium. And there is something called yakju. Yakju is more of a formal way of saying sur in Korea. But in old day, the alcohol was served for the medicinal purpose.
I see.
So that's why the name of sur became yakju.
Yakju, yeah.
But in old day, there was also a lot of prohibition times when there was a drought, when there's not enough grain to feed people. So all the yangban say, oh, it's a yakju is for medicine. And
it's for medical.
cheongju, and they drink yakju. And traditionally, those cheongju is distilled to become soju.
So soju is the final product, and the makgeolli and cheongju is sort of the middle product. So
exactly. Everything is stemmed from brewing rice, and you have three large categories: makgeolli, cheongju, and soju. Depends on the process.
So this term that's thrown around sometimes, it's rice wine. isn't really correct term, isn't it? Is it? I mean, because it's basically distilling. So it's sort of closer to whiskey or vodka than compared to, say, the usual wine that we think of, the wines based on fruits.
Right. I mean, wine is mostly based on fruit, and beer is mostly barley or wheat. So there's not the right term for wine or beer for our 청주 or 막걸리. So and everyone knows sake by now. Before everyone called it rice wine. I think we should start calling it 술, and let people know what is 술 is all about. And 술 is just broad category of alcoholic beverages, but there's a lot of different styles. And the 청주 and 막걸리 and soju, they're all part of 술. And I think that's the term we start spreading to people.
That sounds like a plan.
Yes.
So when we talk about the Korean 술, because when people think of soju, we all think of that green bottle. I think that's what most people are familiar with. But what is the characteristics that really define a good artisanal soju?
So to make draw a clear line between artisanal soju versus a conventional soju that comes in a green bottle, it is first, the base ingredient is very different. So this green bottle soju came about in early 1900s, right after a Korean War. There are not a lot of the resources, and economy was really bad, a lot of famine. The government had to put a ban on using rice as a source of alcohol brewing. So all the small breweries got closed down and consolidated into large corporations. And because they didn't use rice, they found any means to ferment in a most affordable way. So they found sweet potato, or even they imported tapioca to distill to just pretty much the pure ethanol, the pure alcohol to over 90%, which strips out all the flavors and just leaves the alcohol. And then they lower the alcohol by adding water. And then because it doesn't taste like anything, they add additional artificial sweetener or preservative to make it palatable.
I see.
This phenomenon went on for almost a little over half a century, and that really solidified the current drinking culture. That is quite unfortunate, even though we have such an abundant and diverse 술 drinking culture before, and we have over 2,000 years of alcohol brewing and many centuries of soju making. So if you actually look at artisanal soju, those are pretty much single distillation. If you just distill once, the alcohol percentage is lower, but it has a lot more flavor coming from the base 술. So when you taste a soju that's in a green bottle versus artisanal soju, the taste is night and day. And it is my like a big like pet peeve to say the soju is watered down vodka. And I want to tell people to taste the actual artisanal soju, and it will change their mind.
So then can you tell us a little bit specific about what would be, I think a lot of people know what that green bottle soju tastes like. It can be sweet sometimes, and it's high in alcohol. You can sort of, as you said, it doesn't taste not much else other than alcohol. I don't know. I'm not, obviously I'm not equipped with the right vocabulary to describe it, because
I think that's pretty accurate though.
It's pretty, it seems pretty bland.
Yes.
But how's the artisanal soju taste like then?
So artisanal soju, again, it's all the flavors are coming from the fermentation process, the first brewing process. So it depends on what kind of actual ingredients they use, and then the nuruk they use. Nuruk can be very diverse as well. Usually it's made with steamed wheat, but it can be made with the barley or even rice. Sometimes they add like a mung beans, and it can be very different styles and different types of molds get into nuruk. that contributes to flavor. So it can be very nutty, earthy, sometimes slightly funky, but it gives a very unique characteristic on the spirits.
I see. Well, actually, somebody sent in the question before we started the program, which is kind of related to this question of does the rice have the sort of the terroir that's detected, like sort of similar to, you know, how in wine everybody talks about the terroir and, you know, how you can taste the soil that the grape grew on. Does that show up in soju as well? Can you taste the different? I can't imagine there are so many different variations of rice the way there are with wine, but I guess, you know, if you are using, for example, just harvested rice versus old rice, is there a difference? You can tell the difference in taste?
I think soju is pretty much distilled down to the core that it is really hard to detect any fine nuance that it is coming from the like this year's rice or this type of rice. But again, the fermentation process really determines the final outcome. But even for sake, there are different types of the rice strains, but not a lot of people will be able to detect the difference of it. It's not the same as wine's grape. The grape actually has a very unique flavor and characteristic, but the grain doesn't really convey as much. But the how you make nuruk and where it's coming from, nuruk collects different wild yeast and wild mold. So it only live in a certain region and different atmosphere, and each region expresses different flavor profile. I think that really distinguishes the flavor of a Korean sur.
I see. So it's
and one other difference is that sake, they always talk about milling process. They mill down to the core. They're just brewing the starch, just refining the flavor of the brew. But Koreans are a little more primitive, slightly more rustic in how they brew rice. I mean, we brew the same rice that we eat to make sur. So we don't mill down because, I mean, a lot of Korean sur are based in a microbrew or home brewing. So no one really has sophisticated machinery to mill down the rice. They are pretty much using the same rice. But it contributes a lot more interesting flavor because it has an outer layer of proteins and lipids. It's the downside is that it doesn't keep the alcohol brew for a long time because it has other impurities. But it really contributes to the complexity of the flavor. So even though the Korean rice brew is quite similar to sake, but when you actually taste it, it has much richer texture, much earthier flavor, and it really fit well with our spirits, our culture, and our food. I mean, our food is seasoned with doenjang and different gochujang spices, and if you have sake with it, oftentimes sake like falls apart because our flavor is much bolder and has much more impact. But Korean sur, when you taste it, it can actually pair nicely together.
That makes totally sense. But can you, would you say soju is also, I remembered when I was little, you know, the grandfather used to say, had the word hanju, which is basically means that you drink the liquor with food, like a liquor that goes with food. Do you think soju is ultimately, you know, paired with food, should be paired with food the way wines are usually, or is it mostly kind of a sipping liquor, kind of like whiskey?
Yeah, I think Koreans always loved food and beverage together, and there's a food when you're drinking in Korea. I mean, here you go out to the bar, you're standing at the bar drinking beer and there's no food.
Right.
But Koreans always have a great food with it. But what's tricky about pairing Korean food with beverage is that we love to have everything in a one big table. And it's really hard to match with certain flavor profile with a different beverage. And it's often easier to go with one single beverage for the whole night. But since the artisanal soju has a lot of different flavor profile, I think you can have a lot of fun pairing with a variety of dishes by choosing different types of soju and pair with like a main course or different banchan and so on.
Okay. Yeah. So then what would be the best way to enjoy some of the artisanal soju? So
since soju has a lot of different unique flavor, you can try out different ways. I do recommend to enjoy as neat, meaning just don't chill it, just enjoy as is.
Oh, don't even chill it.
Right. Because it has so much flavor and so much fine nuance within that spirit. You want to experience the full spectrum of it. Just like when you're enjoying like fine whiskey or a fine cognac, you don't put ice or you don't chill down. You want to have all the flavor or aromatics comes out. So that is the first thing I would recommend. But if the traditional artisanal soju, those are around 40 to 45%. So they're as strong as whiskey, cognac, or vodka. So if the high proof is slightly bothering to you, then you can add some ice cubes to it to dilute it and lessen the burn of the alcohol. But there's also a different version of it. Since Koreans are so used to drinking green bottle soju, which comes around 20%, these artisanal producers also have another version that comes in the same percentage. Those can be just served chilled, and that can be just drunk as is. And you can have fun with different cocktails. You can, of course, Koreans' #1 favorite, somek, mixed with beer. And or highball is really popular these days. Whiskey highball or soju highball, those are really popular. Just adding in a glass ice with soju and top with the soda, and it makes it very light and refreshing. And another way is adding tonic, which is tonic water, slightly bitter, sweet, that gives another dimension to the drinks. Sort of the like gin and tonic type of absolutely preparation. And then you also sometimes make cocktails with the Korean liquor as well, don't you? Right. Yes. So these are some of the ideas, and I'm going to demonstrate. Yeah, that would be lovely. Some of them. Yeah. Give me 1 second. Absolutely. And while Sommelier Kim is getting ready for his cocktail demonstration, I just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions regarding either Korean traditional liquor or wine, you can send the questions to Twitter at Korea Society Art, or you can email artsandculture@koreasociety.org. I also want to let our viewers know that last year we had a program with 2 of the Korean American soju and makgeolli makers in New York City. Soju is West 32 Soju, and then the other, the makgeolli was from Hana Makgeolli, and that program is also available on our YouTube channel. So if you want to find out more about the young Korean Americans who are making their own Korean traditional liquors, please check out that program on our YouTube. So we have some questions coming in. One of the question is actually about somek. Do you know any, like how that whole somek
started? Like, because I guess it's a lot of people see it in Korean dramas and things like that. Do you know like when that practice kind of started for even Koreans? And as a sommelier, how do you feel about that practice?
Well, I mean, Korea is famous for drinking a lot and drinking very flavorless soju and flavorless beer, and which I guess they start drinking it and they start mixing it, and that's how it came about. But even in Europe or even in US, there is a cocktail that mixed with beer and a shot of whiskey that is called the Boilermaker. So I think it all came very naturally that everyone start drinking cheap liquor with the cheap beer, and they start mixing together for fun.
That makes sense. I think it's also all this like different way of making sumac that attracts a lot of people, because you can find a lot of them on YouTube if you are ever interested. But so here we go. What's the cocktail you're gonna?
I mean, I'm gonna keep it very simple and straightforward. I mean, I have 4 variation of different cocktails, but many of them you can just do it at home also. So first one is a very simple highball, which is basically a spirit and a soda. So like a vodka soda, whiskey soda, they are all part of a highball. So how you make is you just need the large ice cube in a very tall highball glass. And I'm going to use this 풍경사계, which is artisanal Korean soju that is made in Cheongju region. And this producer used a very special nuruk that incorporates a mung bean that gives a very unique flavor. So you don't want to mix with a different juice or different flavoring. You want to get the full aromatics that's coming from this soju. So I'm going to just put simply just club soda that can really open up the different flavors. And I recommend to use actual club soda, not like a Pellegrino or a Perrier, which are very fine bubbles, sort of dissipate quickly. But the club soda has a really vigorous bubbles, which is not very pleasant to drink itself. But if you mix together, it makes a beautiful balance. And at the end, you can just have a little like a citrus peel. In this case, I use the grapefruit. So you can just squeeze it and put it in there. And this is pretty much it. A very simple highball cocktail.
So what would be the ratio, sort of the liquor versus the club soda, sort of like 1-to-1 or to the taste?
Yeah, I mean, at the end, you have to love what you drink. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about enjoying cocktail. You can play around with it, just like cooking. If you like something sour, add some lemon juice. If you like something sweeter, put some sugar in it. If you want to get drunk fast, I mean, put some more liquor in it. That's really simple. So very easy. And another one will be like very simple tonic. Usually tonic goes really well with the lime citrus. Usually you can squeeze 1 or 2 wedges in there.
Oh, so you put lime first?
Yeah, put the lime in, and then in this case, I'm going to use another soju, which is meter. This one is coming from Gyeonggi-do in Yongin region,
which is right outside of Seoul. So it's close to Seoul.
I'm sure many people have been to Everland.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's where it's at. And this producer was awarded with the presidential award in Seoul competition in 2018.
Great.
So this is a fantastic soju as an introduction of high-end soju.
I see.
And
And then you're gonna add some tonic water.
Yep. Tonic water. In this case, I'm using Fever Tree tonic water, which is one of my favorite. And it goes about, so the ratio is about 1:2. If you want something lighter, 1:3. So usually I add 2 ounces of spirits and 4 ounces of soda or tonic water.
Great.
So that is a usual ratio, but if you like it lighter, you can put more tonic water or more soda. And I mean, this is a very simple 1:2 ratio. Anyone can do it at home and to your taste. And you can make a variation with a grapefruit soda or ginger beer. I mean, these are also very classic cocktail, like Moscow Mule. We can make a soju mule or Paloma with a tequila or mezcal. You can make a soju with that.
Right.
And another one, I have a little shaker here. And I usually put lots of ice in the shaker. And have a very unique barley soju. A lot of soju, they're made with rice. And sometimes you see some barley soju coming from Japan. And this is one of very unique soju made with barley in Korea.
How does it taste different from soju
rice?
Rice, yeah.
This one is a lot cleaner and rounder and has a very nice hint of a spice. And it is a fairly neutral compared to a rice base. So this can be a great base spirits for different cocktails or mixed cocktails.
Great.
And I'm adding about 2 ounces of spirits and I'm adding about 1 ounce of lemon juice. And adding about half an ounce of syrup or simple syrup. You can use something like yuja syrup or meshil syrup. However you like, you can be creative. Anything that has a syrupy sweetness. So I mean, the cocktail is basically the balance of spirit with the sour and sweet, which comes in a pretty much 1:3 ratio. 1 become a sugar, 2 become a citrus or sour, and then 3 become a spirit. And that is a very simple.
That is a simple way.
So give a nice shake. And once it's very much chilled, and pour into a nice martini glass.
All right, that looks pretty amazing.
I think you should come over. I have too many.
Exactly.
So a nice slice of lemon, and
wonderful.
There is a little cocktail for you.
Great.
And if we have 1 more minute, I have one more cocktail. And this is a variation of Negroni. We all know Negroni being 3 parts of Campari, which is the bitterness and some sweetness, and sweet vermouth and gin. In this case, I'm going to use the pine soju. The pine gives a very nice spice and hint of menthol eucalyptus note, and almost give a reminiscence.
Very similar to gin. I would imagine.
Exactly. So the Negroni is a exact same part of 1:1:1. So 1 ounce of pine soju, and usually use Campari, but for those who haven't tasted Campari before, which is quite bitter, but Aperol is their more nicer sibling, which is
not as bitter,
much sweeter and not as bitter. I have to open it. All right, and the same amount, and usually the last part is a sweet vermouth, which is made with wine. But in this case, I'm going to use a Korean cheongju. Cheongju is the rice brew, which gives a nice nutty note and a hint of sweetness. So we're going to play with that.
Great.
And it's very simple, and you can just give a gentle stir, and garnish with the orange peel. And in this case, I'm going to give a little flame.
The fancy one, the fancy trick.
And that's that. It's a very simple 4 cocktails, and you can play around with recipes and create many more.
Well, that sounds really amazing. And I really wish you were doing it not on Zoom.
I know. I think you should invite me next time.
Exactly.
Once again for
absolutely
proper tasting.
I'm going to hold you up to that, promise. Yes. But we do have lots of questions coming in. So I do want to ask you a few questions about wine and a few questions about Korean traditional liquors. One of the questions about wine was that, do you believe that global warming is going to affect the terroir of wines in different regions?
Yes, I'm a firm believer of climate change, especially if you are into wine. You definitely see it every single year. The harvest time is getting earlier, and you're starting to see a lot more riper fruits coming from cool regions. And I mean, now you're starting to see England making sparkling wine that is on par with champagne. And champagne is becoming warmer and warmer. So you never know what's going to happen in the next 10, 20 years. So the climate change is real. It's happening. And we should be definitely aware of it. And yeah, it's definitely coming.
It's definitely going to change.
Yep.
Another question was actually, if you can tell us a little bit about, the artisanal makgeolli. You told us the difference between the commercially available soju versus artisanal soju. I would imagine, because any of the viewers who saw the process, basically the soju comes from makgeolli too. So I guess that it will be a similar answer in terms of, for artisanal makgeolli, it will be, no additives, made from one ingredient and that sort of things, correct?
Right, and makgeolli is a part of more of a more common people's drink. It's nothing sophisticated, but if you are trying to make it right, it is very meticulous. You have to take a great care. And you have to use the right ingredients. And all the artisanal producers are using what's available locally, not like rice imported from outside the country. So they're a lot more genuine and authentic to the taste, for sure. And another important thing is nuruk. Nuruk is a very important medium in making 술. And so the selection of nuruk, how it's made, and how you treat the fermentation process, those really take a great effect in flavor of makgeolli. And I mean, I believe makgeolli doesn't travel a lot. They're fairly low in ABV, and a lot of Korean 술 are not pasteurized. So it is really difficult to travel abroad. From Korea to here, it takes about a month. And within a month, the flavor changes dramatically. So, but soju is okay. It's distilled spirits, or cheongju, which is almost same as wine, higher alcoholic percentage. But makgeolli is fairly low, so it's a little difficult.
To import it. Another question was about the artisanal soju makers in Korea. You mentioned that they are very small. A lot of them are family-based. Can you tell us just very briefly a little bit about them? I mean, are they still very much family-owned businesses? Are there any young people, trying new way of brewing the artisanal soju? What's the sort of the scene like there?
I mean, we have seen a lot of modernization of different field, and also alcohol brewing. A lot of people starting to implement modern technology and starting to find the shortcuts of how to make 술. But I think the patience is the greatest virtue when it comes to brewing alcohol. And just like a whiskey, 10 years age whiskey, 30 years age whiskey, the taste is dramatically different. You cannot speed up that 20 years by putting it through the machine. And how they make, how they treat the ingredients and brewing time, even though you understand more how the fermentation goes and what is the actual technique that gets to the next level, but the actual taking the time, you cannot really emulate that. So I truly believe in the craftsmanship of those artisans, and it's not just people who has been practiced for a long time, but also a lot of younger generations who really respect the Korean heritage and trying to recreate, revive the old method. And we're starting to see a lot more of that. So there is definitely a great excitement of Korean traditional food in Korea right now.
And there are a lot more questions, but we are running out of time. So I'm gonna ask you the most popular question that's coming in right now, which is, where can we buy these artisanal soju?
Okay, so since we just got our shipment in January, and unfortunately the pandemic hit, so everything just got disconnected a little bit. But right now in New York and New Jersey, there are a few retailers, which I'll send out the list of the retailers for you guys. There are 3 retailers in Manhattan. They can deliver throughout Manhattan. There are a couple in New Jersey area, and the one shop in Manhattan, Warehouse Wine and Spirits, believe they are able to ship outside the states. There are limited number of states, but they are the one who can ship outside New York, New Jersey.
Yeah. So I promise our viewers that I will send out that information tomorrow. But unfortunately, that's all we have for now. And I really want to go make a drink for myself too. So, but thanks again, Sommelier Kim, for joining us tonight. It was truly a delicious hour. We wish you all the best. Stay healthy. And I want to give our special thanks to Peter, our IT director, for making this live webcast possible, and to our intern, Gia, for getting all the questions and doing social media postings. And of course, thanks to our viewers and members for watching us. Make sure you join us again. Check out what's coming up on our website, koreasociety.org. And also make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And so cheers, everybody, and